Keep up that energy, and we're about to pass the mic to you. Just one more of our speakers, and I think this one is going to be very interesting. Ana González Guerrero is the co-founder and managing director of Youth Climate Lab. And to hear a little bit more about what young Canadians are doing in our local context, we've invited Ana to talk about that. The Youth Climate Lab has been doing some fantastic work around bringing the voices and solutions of youth to decision-making spaces, to that advocacy space, in the area of climate action and sustainable development. Her work is driven by the need to create a more just and inclusive transition towards a sustainable future, and she has been tackling issues in climate change for over 13 years. So that's pretty interesting, and she also leads an innovation fund through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities relating to local economic development. So perhaps we'll hear a little bit more about that as well in your presentation. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the intro and for the warning about my 10 minutes. I think it'll be brief. My name is Ana González, as it was mentioned earlier. I am the co-founder and managing director at the Youth Climate Lab. Hello. This is a very blurry, pixelated picture of my team at COP, the Conference of the Parties. This is the UN negotiations that talk about climate change. And here we're all very sleep deprived, we're all very tired, you can't see it. But basically what we do is we work to promote and accelerate innovative action from young people. We do it in Canada, we're headquartered in Ottawa, but we work globally as well. Yes, we are a global nonprofit and we accelerate youth-led climate action. We do so in two main pillars. Policy is one of them, so the top-down approach. And then we also try and meet the ground-up approach, the bottom-up, grassroots organizations, entrepreneurs. So that's kind of like where the two meet, with the idea that that's where the change is at. Since our inception, I'll be brief, we can skip it, just 11 projects, 32 partners in 35 countries, and we're building the skills of future decision makers, so future young people that deserve to be at the table, while also providing resources and ideally removing barriers to access all of these. Cool. Well, what we advocate for in the policy sphere is we want policy change and not climate change. Why? Young people need to be in the table because they're bringing innovative and different solutions. Also, because Youth Plus owes this to young people. The decisions made today are going to be affecting the future generation more than anyone else. So the premise for our work is that we need to be there and we need to be participating to drive more ambitious action. Why? Because we honestly feel a little bit more of the urgency and the fear that a lot of the times in previous generations hasn't been felt. Because of the access of information, because of all of the things that are coming to us now, we want to be involved and we want to be at that conversation. So, as mentioned before, I'm going to talk a little bit about a specific example. So, a couple of months ago, we ran a project that was partially funded by the Government of Canada. It was called R2030. So we were asked, hey, make the Sustainable Development Goals relevant to young people. By a show of hands, who has heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? Cool, solid, okay. There's 17 goals that basically encompass all of the problems that we currently have. Youth Climate Lab was like, okay, how do we make it relevant? Let's talk about the intersections between the goals. All 17s have been working silos for the most part, but where do they meet? Where can we actually have some space and some collaboration opportunities that relate to the future of young people? So we ran a number of what we call activations, because we're trying to move away from just engagement and into activations. And one of them was a policy jam. So what is a policy jam? Next slide. This sounds cool. Okay, we have a video.
You want to show the video?
Yes, let's do that.
Higher volume.
The spoken word artist came out. The second one for sure gave me chills down my spine, honestly.
That's 80%. And that way too. Not only half, but still.
We will remember women our water. Mother Nature is known to hear water.
Let's finish your conversations and please head to your group.
Everybody sharing their different ideas, I really thought was quite, like, just really interesting that everyone came up with such different ideas, but that sort of all were equally like important to come up with. And I really, because I'm going into that, I thought everyone's probably going to come around with the same sort of decision and the same sort of policy or something, but everyone just had such great ideas, and that just kind of inspired me a lot that we can kind of start to make a change in the world.
So in a nutshell, a policy jam, we put the challenge forward, this young people that attended, to find the intersections between gender, climate, and the future of work, all in the context of the 2030 agenda for the national strategy. So the government of Canada is currently, it's going to be released sometime this week, developing the first iteration of this national strategy. So how is Canada going to be implementing the Sustainable Development Goals? And we had the pleasure to be talking to young people to make sure that their voices were contributing to this conversation. So, in the next slide, very basically, our goals was to co-create smart policy recommendations that would feed into the national strategy. Smart as in, oh my God, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Second one was just to meet cool people. We find that a lot of the action actually just comes from getting people in the room, getting them talking, getting them to connect, and actually find out what each of them is doing and what moves them to act. And then lastly, explore the intersections of climate action, which are SDG 13 and 7, gender equality 5 and 10, and all of this in the context of the future of work. Yeah, who did we meet? We reached over 40,000 people online and in person, 240 in person, and specifically for the policy jams, we had 70 people. We had 65% were female, 33% male, and 2% gender nonconforming. We had a very cool mix of people in terms of what their backgrounds were, ethnicity, and also areas of work. But yeah, the task in hand was basically to identify a problem. Spoiler alert. But we we asked them to identify a problem or a challenge that they thought should be brought up to the attention of the government of Canada in the intersection between gender and climate. So kind of what we've been hearing about and a lot of how it applies internationally, we wanted to bring it to Canada and hear what young people want and are concerned about. So we had nine challenges identified, and I just chose 3 that I thought were interesting. And you might have heard it in the video, but basically everyone came up with very different things, which just like really demonstrate the power of young people's minds. It goes everywhere, really. So the next 2 slides. The first challenge identified was how can Canada better prepare for an increasing number of refugees due to climate migration? Climate migration is a topic that we're starting to hear more and more about. Displacement as a result to climate emergencies or climate catastrophes is going to be increasing. So how is the Canadian population, the Canadian government, preparing to be receiving an inflow of migrants if that's going to happen? So a lot of the recommendations were around access to programs and education, responsiveness to cultural sensitivities, making sure that there is access to jobs, and recognizing that migrant women coming into a country experience that very differently than men coming into the country. Challenge number 2 identified. Build safer and more resilient homes. All in this field, so emotionally, physically, and environmentally. Something that was interesting about this group is that they decided to hone down on the idea that women have traditionally been the primary caretakers or caregivers in households, and how actually feeling safe, both in terms of like physically, emotionally, but also making sure that the homes are resilient to the effects of climate change are a priority. When we're talking about housing, which is often one of the key topics brought up in national debates, how does this relate to the experience of women in that particular context? And and environmentally as well. And then challenge number 3, recognizing the socioeconomic barriers to climate action, particularly regarding the access to spaces such as running for office, elected officials, or just being in policy-making decisions for marginalized groups. So a lot of what was talked in this group was that there's not enough women or minorities in power. What does this reflect? It's very well researched that leaders invest more in, and I'll read the quote, leaders invest more in infrastructure that is already relevant or related to the need of their gender. So when we have more male in decision-making positions,
Can you say that one more time?
leaders invest more in infrastructure that is directly relevant to the needs of their gender. An example of this, childcare introduced in city councils has taken a long time because there weren't enough. It wasn't an issue that was relevant to many. Infrastructure access, this also comes internationally, but lighting in the streets, women recognize that it makes them feel safe to have light in the streets, whereas men may be like, oh, there's another priority, we'll put it up. It's just because we as humans act of experience, and when we have less representation of minorities, marginalized communities, and women, we don't see those reflected in decisions. They talk a little bit too about removing the access of barriers to running for office within Canada, which is a big topic that, again, with my other hat in the typical millennial fashion, I work with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and it's also something that's heavily discussed. How do we encourage more young and women to run for office as elected officials? So what's next? For the particulars of the policy jams that we ran, we submitted this information and all the insights that we collected from these 2 events, plus other 4, to the National Strategy 2030 agenda. So that's going to be coming out soon, and we're very keen to see how much of that was incorporated into it. In general, Youth Climate Lab will continue to advocate for women and youth to be part of the conversation at all points. We want to be considered allies and partners in action. It's moving past engagement and the tokenistic approach of having a check mark of women were included, youth were included, we're done. It's actually how do you see us as an implementer, as a partner, as someone that brings in new solutions, innovative, collaborative approaches like policy jams, if I may say so myself. Just different ways of bringing people to the table that are usually not there. My little call to action is for all of you to think of how we can work together. The Sustainable Development Goals, climate, gender are problems that are too big to address in silos. So how can we do this in a way that is appreciative? So the first one, take it seriously. Recognize the value that we bring to the table, and that when we're given the opportunities and resources, we can develop a lot of the solutions that are needed. Secondly, applicable. Make sure, again, moving away from tokenism and making sure that the inputs and insights that are coming out of engagements, activities, etc., are actually going somewhere. So an example of this that I thought was hopefully well done is the Our 2030 project, which the information will feed into policy making. Provocative. I speak on behalf of youth because that's who I have the pleasure to interact the most with. But let us be innovative, let us take the risk. We honestly can't afford not to be taking risks at this point. The magnitude of the challenge needs to be met with a magnitude of solutions. So young people de-risk a lot of this. We can run pilots, we can be nimble, we can do it quickly and iterate. We as an organization do it often. So when you partner with us as like big partners, governments, private sector, you're trusting young people and you're also allowing them to be a little bit more fun, provocative, I'll use it again. And lastly, collaborative. All voices deserve to be heard and need to be part of this conversation. We've said it like 10 times so far, but young people are going to be the most impacted. We are the generation that has the most to lose and the most to gain with climate change. So we must, and we have to punch above our weight. Yeah, let's do it all together.